This episode of WWRD, what would a regulator do? Now, the inspiration for this episode comes from the overwhelming response we got to our Lunch and Learn emails that went out last week. And of the topics that we have available to firms to choose, the one that we saw by far the most amount of interest in was a topic called, why does the regulator keep banging on about diversity? So we thought to give a little taster for what's to come in those sessions, we talk a little bit about why the regulator might be banging on about diversity. Now, I want to give it to you from a regulator's perspective, but before we do that, let's look at it from an industry perspective. So you're trying to run a financial services firm, you're obviously trying to turn a profit, and yet the regulator is continuously beating this drum about having more diversity, particularly at board level. Now, you probably think, how do we move forward? And for, let's say, credit institutions, how do we get back to lending and back to business as usual and trying to drive forward the economy and oil the wheels when we're continuously got a regulator that's looking back at what happened 10 years ago and dragging us back and not let us get on with developing and growing business? And it's an understandable perspective, but now let's look at it from a regulator's point of view. If the regulator has concerns that what went wrong 10 years ago hasn't been fixed, then they're very reluctant to just let banks move on and other institutions move on when they feel that, well, if it's not properly fixed, then it's just going to go wrong again and we're setting ourselves up for another crisis. So why does the regulator bang on about diversity? Well, it's, I think, because one of the key issues that happened in the run into the crisis and one of the key fears that the regulator has is around groupthink. So it is the risk, particularly at senior leadership level in institutions, that all of the people around the table think the same. And the problem with that is, and the way that you try to guard against it is by introducing diversity, because what you're also trying to guard against is unconscious bias. So the risk that the people around the table are too closely associated, perhaps it's an old boys club, and it's another fear that the regulator would have, and they're trying to shake that up, but people are too closely associated, too closely aligned, think too similarly, and don't come at problems with a different perspective, challenge each other, and try and come up with new solutions. Remember what they say, do what you always did, get what you always got. So if we're in a cycle of financial crises and they come around in time, then you want to try and break that cycle from a regulator's perspective. And that one of the ways that they think you can do that and really get to grips with groupthink is by requiring diversity at board level to try and make sure that you remove that unconscious bias and you get more challenge. But here's a challenge for the regulator when it comes to introducing more diversity. Maybe diversity from a firm's perspective means that you bring onto the board people who do not come from a financial services background. You're bringing on people who maybe have experience as leadership mentors or something like that. And I suppose the challenge then is you need to pass fitness and probity, and fitness is about being able for the job, but maybe fitness doesn't mean being a financial services expert, and maybe people with that background and similar backgrounds need to be able to get through fitness and probity to take that position in a leadership and bring that introduce that sense of diversity. So it's a challenge, and of course another challenge then is as you have more diverse groups and maybe different cultural mixes, how does all of that work? And are people going to be able to work together effectively if they're too different and too diverse? So there's another challenge for the future, and one I think that it's okay for firms to kind of interact with the regulator about and discuss, because this is really where they're expected to go and to be led. So one to keep in mind too. Okay, that's all my thoughts on why the regulator might be banging on about diversity. Anything from you, Silent Bob? No, he's good too. Thanks very much for listening. We'll catch you next time on WWRD.